So it's been 20 years now since the Manic Street Preachers have released Lifeblood. Today we're going to be celebrating that album. Good day to you, Al. Hope everything's well. I know you absolutely love the Manic Street Preachers. In fact, if there's anything that you don't know about it, it's probably not worth knowing. But listening to this album, I've listened to this a few times actually over the years. I think this is seriously underrated.
Yeah, look, it's actually one of my favourite albums, and that's something to say because there's actually 14 albums by the Manic Street Preachers, and we're not even going to talk about the B-sides because we'd be here all day. But you are right, mate. It's been 20 years now. Initially, when this album first came out in 2004, they had a bit of a hiatus. So obviously they had released the greatest hits, and before that they had released Know Your Enemy. And for those interested, we did do a review of the remastering of that a while ago. So they came out and they said this album was going to be about alienation, solitude, and ghosts. And I was initially kind of thought, oh, here we go. But of course, it was released and it got mixed reviews. So let's be honest, it got mixed reviews, mostly around the 6, 7 out of 10. And it was the first time since Generation Terrorist that they didn't crack the top 10 when the album was released. It came in at number 13, which was the same as their first album, Generation Terrorist. So I think Nicky Wire was pretty disappointed there. Nicky Wire being the chief lyricist now since the sad disappearance of Richey Edwards. And I think this album, out of all the albums, purely reflects the sadness and quietness in contemplating a bandmate that had been gone for 10 years. And I think most of the songs in this, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts, kind of a quiet contemplation songs. Like Gone are the real political stance, other than the song Emily off this album. But it opens up with 1985, mate. Now, what are your thoughts? I mean, you've been a bit of a quiet Manic Street Preachers fan. I'm a huge champion of the band. Well, what's your first take of this album 20 years old?
Look, I think you're spot on. I think that the songs are far, far less political. I look at it, that doesn't stop him having a song about Richie Nixon up front, which sounds political to me. I don't know if it was, but there was the keyboard right in Know Your Enemy, so it's not as if it was too dissimilar, but it feels like they were going a little bit more all in on the keyboards and the synths. So I don't know if they felt that worked out for them, but for me, I'm listening to this album and it feels like a modern album. It doesn't, and I think that I'm putting my hat on as to what this sounded like 20 years ago when I was first listening to this, and I think that there maybe been a slight misapprehension around albums like that. Yeah, you're going in the synth direction. It just wasn't really maybe looked upon in a similar light today, where, I don't know, this is sort of par for the course, isn't it?
I think you hit the nail on the head, mate. So you've got to remember the Manic Street Preachers had a few different camps around. So they had the people who wanted the old school kind of punk stuff. And then, of course, they had Everything Must Go, which was a massive commercial success, as well as the follow-up to that, This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours. Now, both of these albums were pretty huge. So all of a sudden you had the radio-friendly fans who wanted more of this. And then, of course, in 2000, Know Your Enemy came out. And as the Manic Street Preachers do, they do whatever they want. They want to go whatever direction they feel they want to be artistically. And that got mixed reviews, and some fans jumped on, but some jumped off. Then, of course, this album, Lifeblood here, this is a bit of a Manic Street Preachers just going, fuck you, we're going to do whatever we want and have a crack at this new sound. And they're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, because there's going to be
Correct.
people who are crying out for, more of what they had done previously. But if they were to do that, then people will be going, oh, you're just same, and you're not really evolving. So that's one of the main discussion points I wanted to have today. And we can talk about other bands as well who have been around for a long time, who are able to constantly reinvent themselves, and whether it's for whether history kind of is on your side, if it works or not. It obviously has for the Manic Street Preachers, because they've been around for 30 plus years. They've had 14 very successful albums and a fan base that's are pretty out there, mate. I don't know if you've ever been to a Manic Street Preachers concert, but you get some pretty interesting people there who are really die-hard fans. And I'm not going to quite put myself in the camp there. I don't have any tattoos. I can't be saying that. But what are your thoughts on that, mate? That for a band that wants to go somewhere experimentally and doesn't necessarily pay off?
It can be disaster for certain bands. I think that it could either work out for the band or not, as plainly as that, but sometimes it can be terminal for a band if they're going down this direction. And often in the 90s, the 2000s, you would see bands that would turn to the keyboards, like they'd see Radiohead doing it successfully. They think, cool, let's have a crack at that. And they just come off as being literally imitations of themselves. So I think that, it's a risk, but I guess the reward is that it can open you up to become a little bit more broader and much more mainstream in terms of how you're being accepted, and mainstream on your terms, if that makes sense. So like Radiohead, if that makes sense. But I'm actually interested around reference points for this album. As I said before, I think that this album actually sounds quite modern. It doesn't sound, but again, 20 years ago, maybe I might have had a different view to it. But I think that the couple of reference points that I've got here for the band for this particular album is, of course, there's Manic Street Preachers here, but I'm thinking this is kind of almost, there is a bit of U2, but I think there's also a bit of Garbage. I don't know if you've heard too much of those bands. I mean, I'm not a massive U2 fan, but the album that they brought out in 2000 and sort of the Garbage with a lot of the synths with layered on with the guitars, it feels like that was a possible reference point, because I can't really find too many albums sounding quite like this. I mean, of course, you've got bands that are 80s bands like New Order that might be influencing this, but I can't hear too many that are like this. I don't know if you've got any yourself there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I definitely think it harks back to that kind of 80s sound on certain songs with synths used. Like the opening track, 1985, is just a real nostalgic kind of trip down the road, but it's timeless. It's still a great song. And I mean, the live version that's been kind of remastered that's out on YouTube now is absolutely brilliant. And it is one song that does get a bit of a go in the set lists these days. But look, I'd agree with you, mate. In terms of it aging really well and having different reference points, I couldn't agree more with particular songs, like one of the middle track songs, to Repel Ghosts, which is probably my favourite track off the album. I just think it was massively ahead of its time, and even though it harks back to a similar sound kind of from the mid to late 80s, I think they were a step ahead of their time in terms of what their fans and what the critics were kind of looking for or hoping to hear, and then all of a sudden they're producing stuff that's completely out there. But it is a little bit disconnected, the album. Like, it kind of has the lead single, The Love of Richard Nixon, which, if you compare that to the demo, which is on track 3, available on Spotify, it's completely different. Like the live version demo, complete with the compared to the final release of the polished version, and I still cannot particularly warm to this song. And I know many fans out there think it's a bit of a mistake, but there's some other absolute brilliant songs off this album that truly represent the Manic Street Preachers trying to evolve and basically saying, this is what we're doing, like us or don't. And I don't know, I just think 20 years on, even the band have kind of reflected to go, that's pretty good, because you've got to remember 2004, they were competing with, the back end of the Strokes, as well as then the pop charts. You had Mysterious Girl with Peter Andre. I read that on a website today. I do know you're a massive Peter Andre fan out there. So
I'd like to probably just cap it off with the reissue. So it's been remastered. Have you got any thoughts on the types of tracks that are released? I think there's obviously bonus tracks and demos and the like. Any comments there or any nuggets that viewers might want to check out?
I do, mate. Look, we could go through each song as a B-side and talk about it, but we're not here for that. And look, you get bang for buck for the Manic Street Preachers. Whenever they release like a deluxe edition or a remastered version, geez, you get bang for buck. The amount of songs that you get, they're actually quality that you can sit and listen to. You can compare to the original versions and get a bit of an idea of what it would have been like to be a fly on the wall during the recording sessions. I'm interested with the remastering, though. There are some tracks that have been worked on more than others. Empty Souls, the drums on that are really tight and fantastic, and the bass has been turned up a bit, but they didn't reorder any of the songs. So on Know Your Enemy, that was taken back to the original kind of song list that they wanted to have, which wasn't the final release. But on this one, they haven't touched that, which I thought was interesting, because I probably would have replaced one or two of the songs with either one of the B-sides or kept it as a 10-track album and kept it more to the quiet, more solitudal kind of sound that I guess they were trying to achieve with this album. But yeah, there are some really good B-sides on there, mate, but we could be here talking all day about it. I'm just really, really happy that they've put some time and effort into this reissue and remastering of what is, to me, one of the classic albums of the early 2000s.
Definitely well said. So that's very interesting. Would love to hear your comments on where you see Lifeblood as a release in terms of the wider Manic Street Preachers catalogue. So let us know in the comments. We'd be really interested to hear that. So that is Lifeblood 20.